Hey everybody, this is Kevin, and today I wanted to talk about elections and how elections affect markets. I've talked to a number of you this year, and many of you have said because the election is in 2016 that you believe markets will, and then you can fill in the blank, either go up or go down. Now, most people have said that markets will go down because it's an election year. And so speaking with our friends over at Dimensional yesterday, I told them about this issue, and they shared these slides with me. And so all their data comes from Fama and French, and it's really a great data set. They are from Chicago, and a client joked with me earlier in the week that they didn't think anything good has ever come out of Chicago, but the data has been reviewed across the country by other people, and Fama won the Nobel Prize. So anyway, here comes the data on markets, and before I get to it, we are pattern-seeking beings. And the reason for that is because the ones of us who survived over the years have been ones that have seen when there's a pattern in the brush and it's actually a tiger, we've been able to recognize the pattern. So we try really hard to look for patterns, and with investing, many times it can do more harm than good. So anyway, let's take a look at the data. So during the year of, which is in the blue, and then the subsequent year, which is the year after, which is in the green, we can see going back to Hoover versus Smith. I think that's Smith. Yeah, back to 1928, we can see what's happened with the year of the market and then the year after the market. And by the way, this is in the U.S. This is the S&P 500. I'll also show you data from the world as well as emerging markets. But I think the S&P 500 would probably be the greatest data set. And as you see, the year of elections is in blue. The year after the election is in green. And so immediately, does a pattern jump out to you out of this data? And I would suggest to you that it appears, and when I say this, I'm going to discredit it. It appears that more often than not, markets have gone up in election years. Now, the reason why I'm going to discredit it is it doesn't really matter what's happened in the past. We just know that it's the last couple elections, markets have gone down, and maybe that's the reason why people believe that markets will go down again this time. But when you look at the overwhelming amount of data, it tells us exactly the same thing, I believe, what markets tell us, and that's over the very long term, markets seem to go up. If it's an election year, maybe they will, maybe they won't. The year after election, if anything, you could say, well, buy the election and sell the next year. But again, I think that would be a huge mistake. But the data does not really back up the fact that if it's an election year, it's necessarily going to be a market crash. Now, it could be. So let's look at the actual annualized returns during presidential terms. And again, this is not a Democrat or Republican thing, although some people may try to make it one. More often than not, markets have done very well during everyone's presidential term. Again, over decades, markets seem to keep going up. And hopefully that will continue in the U.S. Okay, so let's look at the actual returns in Europe, Asia, and Far East. It's the EFA. Europe, Australasia, I should say, and the Far East. Well, again, if we look at returns during market years, there's been times during market years that Europe, Far East, and Australasia index has gone down. There's been times when it's gone up. And the year after, I mean, this is, I'm going to say this jokingly, but the year after an election, you should buy EFA based on the fact that the green, which is the subsequent year after the election, looks a lot better going positive than negative. But once again, you have to be very careful to extrapolate anything from this data. It's no 100%. Okay, and then here's the returns for EFA. And what we can see is, again, they're mostly positive. Recently, EFA returns have been very poor, and so you want to buy low and sell high. So maybe it's a good time to keep your EFA exposure. I wouldn't say to increase it, but to keep your EFA exposure. Okay, so let's look at emerging markets. Now, the data set here, as in the past, has been less beneficial because it doesn't go back nearly as long. It goes back to the 1988 election. But once again, there's been times during presidential elections where the market has crashed, and then subsequent years the markets come back. More often than not, it's positive, and once again, emerging markets have been in the doghouse lately. They've been very poor. That doesn't mean they're going to stay poor. And then here's the emerging market returns during the different presidential terms. Mostly positive, but again, the last election, or the last term, I should say, emerging markets have been negative. And so we're coming down to the end here. This is bonds, and bonds are almost universally positive. We can see back in the 70s when inflation was great, bonds were great. And so I'm going to pause for 1 second and then sum things up for you. So what I would tell you to take away from this presentation, this data set, is that whenever you hear someone making claims about whatever the market does, is ask them, when you say that, is that based on your experience or is that based on evidence? And once again, when you look at the evidence does not always actually affirm the things that we believe based on anecdotal evidence. And so hopefully this has been helpful. Thanks for watching.